When the lone wanderer of Vault 101 emerged into the capital wasteland, and their eyes adjusted to the natural light for the first time, they found themselves on a vista overlooking a landscape that had been left in ruins for nearly 200 years. As they scanned the horizon, searching for their father, they saw something odd off to the south. A ramshackle structure made of angular pieces of metal. When they approached the site, they found the angular metal was the wings of an antique jet plane that formed the gate of a settlement. This is the story of that settlement. This is the story of Megaton. We'll start this with an examination of the sites surrounding Megaton in the Fallout universe. We'll then move to the layout and composition of the town, and follow that with the known history of Megaton. We'll then close with some notes I have on the topic. With that said, let's get started. While Megaton is a community that came into being in the post-war world, and it has no direct analog in the real world, we can extrapolate its general location from the locations of sites that do have real-world analogs. In this case, we can use Fairfax, Virginia, and Bethesda, Maryland. Considering the location of Megaton in comparison with these two reference points, we can put Megaton close to the real-world Tysons, Virginia. In the Fallout universe, Megaton lies in the southern central section of the version of the Capital Wasteland that we get to explore in Fallout 3. It sits west-northwest of downtown Washington, D.C., and southwest of the Potomac River. Vault 101, the one-time home of the Lone Wanderer, lies up the hill to the northwest. The small town of Springvale, with its raider-infested school, lies just to the north of Megaton. A super-duper mart, loaded with clutter and raiders, lies down the slope to the east. A sewer way station also lies downhill of Megaton to the southeast, near the fire ant-infested ruins of Grey Ditch. The ruins of aforementioned Fairfax lie to the settlement's south-southwest. With the surroundings of Megaton considered, let's examine the layout of the town itself. Megaton lies entirely within the bowl of a large bomb crater. At the heart of the crater, there sits an undetonated nuclear bomb that fell into the crater on the day of the Great War. The settlers who constructed the settlement established a series of sheet metal and scrap structures linked by walkways and a leaky network of rusty pipes. The town is ringed by a wall of scrap and is home to 8 houses, including a common house. There's a general store, a restaurant, a bar and inn, a clinic, a church of the Children of Adam, 2 public bathrooms, an armory, and a water treatment plant. With that said, let's get into the history of Megaton. The story of Megaton begins just under 200 years before the emergence of the Lone Wanderer from Vault 101. On the morning of Saturday, October 23rd, 2077, the old world came to an end as the surface of the Earth was peppered with nuclear munitions that wiped the pre-war civilizations away with waves of atomic fire. One such bomb, likely a missile launched from China or from a Chinese submarine off the eastern seaboard, fell to Earth south of the town of Springvale, where it detonated, digging a deep crater into the Earth, flinging rock and soil up to become radioactive fallout. Not long after this, another bomb fell in the same general spot. This bomb, likely dropped accidentally by an American bomber, either wasn't armed or had a faulty arming system and didn't detonate upon impact. Instead, it rolled into the heart of the crater, where it would sit undisturbed for the next 200 years. Over the decades, the radioactivity of the crater and the wasteland as a whole declined as the hottest elements left behind decayed into more stable elements. With the pre-war forests scorched away by nuclear fire, wind blew across the landscape unabated. A group of settlers found that the crater served as an excellent windbreak and they camped within. Over the decades, structures were built, and eventually they started to build the walls around the settlement. The search for construction materials brought them to a nearby airport, and they hauled old plane parts across the wasteland, erecting walls and structures within. While many of the settlers were wary of the bomb at the heart of the crater, there were those for whom the bomb was even more of a reason to build the settlement than the protective crater around it. The first Children of Adam. The Children of Adam believe that every atom is a universe in its own right, and that the Great War, though destructive in appearance, was in fact an unmatched event of creation in which an uncountable number of universes were blown into existence by the thousands of detonations across the world. The faithful of the Children of Adam worship all things related to atomic bombs, and thus the bomb at the center of the settlement that would become Megaton was a big draw. Though the beliefs of the Children of Adam were strange to the other settlers, the believers and non-believers got along well enough and the settlement grew into a stable entity. Over the coming decades, the Church of the Children of Adam grew from this first site to spread up the East Coast, at least as far as Bar Harbor, Maine, or Far Harbor as it became known after the bombs. In early 2241, Megaton was host to some interesting new outsiders in blue jumpsuits, representatives of Vault 101. After some initial awkwardness, the Vault representatives were welcomed by the settlers, who told them of the capital wasteland that surrounded them. While the bulk of the party returned to the nearby Vault, 2 members of the expedition were left behind to act as ambassadors. Though the Vault seemed intent on more interaction with the locals, this activity never seems to have materialized, and at least one of the ambassadors, Agnes Taylor, returned to the Vault. By 2277, Megaton was fairly stable. Though we don't know the exact number of citizens of the town, we know that it had swollen to a population that was larger than the housing could properly contain, leaving many to seek shelter in the common house. The town was protected by the marksman Stockholm, who watched over the gate, and Lucas Sims, who voluntarily served as the sheriff for the community. Sims lived in the house near the town entrance with his son Hardin. Along with the human guards, a protectron known as Deputy Weld watched over the front gate, while a Mr. Gutsy known as Deputy Steele guarded the community's armory. Though the strength of the security team may not have seemed immediately obvious, it managed to fend off assaults, including an attempt by the raiders of the nearby Springvale School. The community maintained trade with nearby settlements through the caravans of Canterbury Commons. Within Megaton itself, Moira Brown ran the community's only general store, Craterside Supply. Watched over by the wary eyes of her mercenary guard, Moira kept the town stocked with necessities. Alongside her work as a shopkeeper, Moira was known for the scientific experiments she ran. Colin Moriarty operated Moriarty's Saloon, the town's main inn and den of sin. From behind the bar, Gob, Moriarty's ghoul bartender, sold alcoholic drinks. While Gob had once been a citizen of the ghoul community of Underworld, he had been captured by the slavers of Paradise Falls. Moriarty had purchased Gob from the slavers and now tasked the ghoul with working for him to pay off this debt, a debt that increased with every meal at Moriarty's. Moriarty also offered companionship to go with the beds he rented, services proffered by Nova and Silver. Aside from Moriarty's Saloon, the only other restaurant was the Brass Lantern, run by the Stahl siblings, Jenny, Andy, and Leo. While Jenny was happy with her life in Megaton, Andy was less enthused with his lifestyle, and unbeknownst to the two of them, their brother Leo was dealing with long-term addiction by siphoning off family funds to feed his drug habit. Aside from Moriarty, the only other citizen aware of Leo's addiction was Doc Church, who operated the town's clinic. While he was generally popular with the people of Megaton, little did they know that Doc Church once lived amongst the slavers of Paradise Falls as their medic. Among the settlement's more recent arrivals were Lucy West and Mr. Burke. Lucy West transplanted herself from the nearby settlement of Erifu, where her parents and younger brother lived on an old bridge over the Potomac. Mr. Burke was something of an enigma to the townspeople. He had walked into Moriarty's and claimed that he was waiting for an opportunist to come through. Though he had a house in the town, he didn't become a part of the community. Jericho, a former raider, lived amongst those he may have once preyed upon. Though retired, he could potentially be coaxed back into action if presented with the right employer. Another retiree, Billy Creel, was a former caravan guard who had settled down in Megaton with his young ward Maggie. Maggie's parents were killed in the wastes, leading Billy Creel to adopt her and bring her to the safety of Megaton, where she became friends with Hardin Sims. Though the adoption of Maggie appeared to be a virtuous act, Moriarty suspected that Billy Creel may have actually killed Maggie's parents and kept her as a trophy of his exploits. At the heart of the town, the faithful of the Church of the Children of Adam were shepherded by Confessor Cromwell and Mother Maya, who maintained the church and preached their faith to those who would listen. Running up and down the walls of the crater outside the church, decades-old rusty, scavenged pipes still managed to carry the town's water, if only barely. At the water treatment plant, Walter did everything he could to keep the system going. Outside of Walter, the oldest citizens in town were likely Manya and Nathan. Manya served as the town's unofficial historian, sharing knowledge of the origins of the settlement with those who would ask. Lastly, the town's residents were rounded out by Mickey, a beggar who lingered on the outskirts of Megaton, asking passing travelers for water. While the town had once been home to a pair of ambassadors from Vault 101, it had been years since they had returned home. That said, on August 17, 2277, the town temporarily hosted a recent resident of the Vault, a doctor named James. James had been through Megaton before, but it had been years since his last visit. Once a researcher working on a massive water purification project at the Jefferson Memorial, James had been living in Vault 101 for the past 19 years. He had taken on the job of the vault's physician after his wife had passed away in childbirth. Though the loss of his wife and the birth of his child had forced him to abandon his work on water purification, he had never stopped researching the means of neutralizing radiation in water. While searching the vault's computers, he had discovered information on the Garden of Eden creation kit, a miracle technology that seemed like it might be exactly what he needed. When the time was right, he snuck out of the vault. While his child was now an adult, he left them behind, hoping that they would stay behind in the safety of the vault. Sadly, a radroach infestation that coincided with his escape caused absolute chaos in the vault, and took the life of Agnes Taylor, the former vault ambassador to Megaton. With the vault becoming an unsafe place for James's child to stay, they left it behind, running out into the wasteland beyond the massive door. As they stepped outside for the first time, they became the lone wanderer of Vault 101, and they began the hunt for their father. When the lone wanderer arrived in Megaton for the first time, they found that their father had already moved on, and was heading to the offices of Galaxy News Radio in the ruins of downtown Washington, D.C. Though Megaton was only a stepping stone on the lone wanderer's adventure to becoming a major force in the history of the Capital Wasteland, they found a number of problems to address in Megaton. Silver, once one of the services offered by Moriarty, ran off with some of his money in the hopes of making a new life on her own. Though Moriarty sent the Lone Wanderer after Silver, the Lone Wanderer returned empty-handed with false news of her escape. The Lone Wanderer helped to repair Megaton's water pipes and supplied Walter with scrap metal for further repairs for a nominal fee. They traveled to Erifu to check on Lucy West's family. The story of what they found there will be told another time, but it should suffice to say that they managed to save Lucy's brother and the community of Erifu from a terrible fate. The Lone Wanderer helped Moira Brown to assemble a wasteland survival guide, serving as her field researcher as she wrote chapters on hostile wildlife, scavenging, and utilizing robots, among other topics. When their medical prowess convinced Doc Church to let the personal problem of Leo Stahl's chem addiction slip, they helped him to break his habit and restore his relationship with his siblings. Lastly, and most importantly, the Lone Wanderer managed to disarm the nuclear bomb at the center of town on the behalf of Lucas Sims, earning them the everlasting respect of the people of Megaton. As a reward for this action, they were granted a home in town, with a robotic butler, Wadsworth. Though the home wasn't fully furnished, Moira Brown offered several items of furniture for a price. Alright, that pretty much covers the story of Megaton in Fallout 3, but I've got some notes on the topic before closing things out. First, this video marks the first time I've covered a settlement that has no real analog or anchor point. Along with that, this is the first time I've covered an inhabited settlement without the overarching faction taking the lion's share of the video's attention, e.g. Crater. Second, I didn't use the game guide's information here as it's not necessarily canonical. There's a lot of information on the characters of Fallout 3 in the game guide, but to my knowledge, the information has the status of being canon until the devs decide that it's not. The guides are sent to the printer before the game is completed, so there's some notes about characters and locations that aren't accurate as of the release of the game. Third, when I mentioned the Lone Wanderer helping the people of Megaton, these are potentially canonical outcomes. Specifically, this is the outcome of things if one plays the Lone Wanderer with good karma and the best outcomes in mind. The biggest alternate version of things comes with working for Mr. Burke instead of Lucas Sims, and rigging the bomb to blow rather than disarming it. If one pursues this line of the quest, then Megaton will be destroyed, and the Lone Wanderer will instead work out of Tenpenny Tower. It should also be noted that if this is the chosen option, Moira Brown will survive the blast and turn into a ghoul. Fourth, and this is related to the previous point, if one talks to Mr. Burke and he proposes the detonation of the bomb at the heart of the town, the player can bring this news to Lucas Sims. Sims will then attempt to arrest Mr. Burke, and though he will pretend to comply, he will subsequently kill Lucas Sims if the player doesn't intervene. Fifth, I could be wrong in assuming that the Agnes mentioned in the Overseer's notes about Megaton refers to Agnes Taylor, or Grandma Taylor. It's not 100% confirmed, but given that the expedition took place 36 years prior to the events of the game, Agnes could easily be the right age to be a grandma. Sixth, along with being the sheriff, Lucas Sims also considered himself to be the mayor, but this is a claim that Moriarty would dispute. Seventh, Rory McLaren, a slave at Paradise Falls, will venture to Megaton if freed, and find a place at Moriarty's. This is interesting given that Moriarty's bartender, Gob, was once also a slave at Paradise Falls. Eighth, while the children of Adam may be hostile in places in Fallout 4, in Fallout 3 they're harmless. Though he views nuclear detonations to be a holy event, Confessor Cromwell never had any plans to detonate the bomb at the heart of the town. In his words, quote, "I am but a man. Who am I to bring these people to glory? Who am I to seek to cause the division?" End quote. While he would welcome a death at the detonation of the bomb in the town, he personally doesn't feel worthy of being the one to perform the act. Ninth, there is a harmful offshoot of the Children of Adam in Fallout 3 as of the Broken Steel DLC, the Apostles of the Eternal Light. These fanatics take aqua pura, the clean water produced at Project Purity, and create the highly radioactive product they call holy water. If old Mickey, the water beggar, survives long enough to drink this water, he dies on the spot. 10th, Nathan, Manya's husband, is a die-hard patriot who takes the Enclave's message of bringing back the USA to heart. Towards the end of the main quest, he can be found in Raven Rock, either having been kidnapped or possibly after volunteering to come in on his own. 11th, while the plane parts in Megaton make it fairly distinctive, there's really only maybe 1 or 2 planes that were used in Megaton's construction. Manya talks about how they were hauled to Crater to build the town. I tried to see where they could have gotten these planes based on real-world airports and airstrips. Washington, D.C. has 4 airfields near it: Washington Dulles International Airport, Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, College Park Airport, and Joint Base Andrews. Given the location near Tysons, Virginia, Dulles, 12 miles to the west, would be the most likely airport to supply the planes. 12th, I wouldn't be surprised if the airport in the Fallout universe was also named Dulles International Airport. While the real Dulles International Airport was named for John Foster Dulles, the Secretary of State under President Eisenhower, I'd wager that in the Fallout universe it would be named for his brother, Alan Welsh Dulles, the head of the CIA. Given the orientation of the American government in the Fallout universe, this feels more like their style. 13th, on that same topic, there was once another airfield in DC. Known as Hoover Field, it was closed in 1941 as it sat on the current site of the Pentagon. Lastly, when I was filming in the Sims house, I considered something that had never really come to mind before. Why would they install broken clocks? Every clock in Fallout 3 is stopped at 9:47 a.m., the moment the EMP of the bombs stopped them. While it's conceivable that existing installed clocks would be left where they are, Megaton is entirely new construction. Why then did they bother to install broken clocks on their walls? It could have been that it was just a decoration, or that they were put up as a reminder of the world before, or maybe we should assume that the clocks do work and Bethesda just didn't want to have to animate them given the accelerated timescale, because it would look kind of weird. Regardless, I thought this was an interesting thing to consider. Alright, I think that'll do it for the story of Megaton. If you want to receive notifications when I launch lore videos, you can follow me on Twitter at GamingWithMaps. I've opened up my channel's Discord to the public. If you're interested in discussing Fallout lore, announcements on upcoming content, or voting on the next lore video, come on by. There's a link on the channel's banner. I'm streaming on YouTube once a week. I don't have a specific time nailed down, but I try to announce when I'm going to stream a day ahead on Twitter. If you're interested, come and check it out. If you appreciate what I do here, and you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron with Patreon. I want to thank my patrons, Mesothelioma, 76 of Texas, Dark Malcontent, Brian, Real76, Dr. Orion, Samsung Smart Fridge, Night Spearhead, and Ahotep for their support. This has been the Irresolute Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.